It sounds like you think it has legs going into 2023.
Yeah, I really do. Thinking about the move it's had over the last few months, I mean, after a long period of challenges at the company, some things have started to go right for them. And if I kind of work backwards from the most recent, we're now looking at China maybe reopening pretty quickly. That maybe benefits air travel and Boeing more than anything, or at least it's high on the list. China's a huge part of the travel ecosystem and the Boeing and Airbus backlog. The company recently had an investor day in November that I thought went well and will prove to be a pretty important marker for the company. A lot of visibility with management and people working at the company, a good vibe coming out of that event, and financial guidance provided for the first time in 4 years. You had the Dash 7 and the Dash 10 news on the MAX recently, which is pretty important. But I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just simple demand for the product. The order flow has been really strong. There was an order last night from BOC. You had the United 787 order a few weeks ago, the largest order for the program in its history. The MAX orders have been particularly strong despite everything that's happened with that airplane. So, long term, there's growth in the demand to fly. This remains a global duopoly between Boeing and Airbus. And so just these orders coming in really strong, I think, is the most important thing for the stock over time and why it's been strong of late.
How meaningful is the China market as that reopening plays out right now for Boeing, especially given the fact that China has been putting so much money to work on its own homegrown rival?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people in China, and the penetration rate of those that fly regularly is increasing every year. So, in recent years, pre-pandemic, when things are more normal and you can measure it, it's been about 20% of global seat miles flown, about 20% of the Boeing and Airbus backlog and deliveries. It's lower in the backlog today because they haven't ordered in a while. So, if they reopen and flight restarts, you could see orders start to come out of China as well. So, Boeing can deliver a lot of airplanes and generate a lot of cash flow with China not taking airplanes, but it's historically been a big part of the market and will help them a lot if they come back. China is also the only country that has yet to restart deliveries and flights of the MAX. And so, if they have the demand and they need the lift, that could be another catalyst as well if they start taking the MAX again.
No, this sort of structural demand to, I guess, rebuild or expand fleets as it plays out. One, I assume you're suggesting, based on liking Boeing, that there's really been no, harm to Boeing's franchise longer term from all of its issues. And then two, what does it mean for the rest of the food chain in aerospace?
Yeah, I don't think there's been major harm to Boeing's franchise. There's maybe been some harm, a small amount of harm, or temporary harm. You definitely can't, just put aside what happened with the MAX. But, order flow on the MAX has been really strong. I mean, all of its largest customers, whether it's, Southwest, United, Ryanair, Alaska, they've all stuck with the airplane. They've all ordered more of it since the onset of the pandemic. And so, things have gone okay there. 787 remains the best wide body in the market. And also, over time, Boeing and Airbus just develop new airplanes. And so, the MAX will be replaced one day, probably, in the early 2030s. So I think the franchise took a hit, but is okay. And it's a global duopoly. And over time, we'll own half of that market. In terms of the supply chain, there's many really high quality businesses in the supply chain. The economics actually tend to be better for Boeing suppliers than for Boeing. Through most of the cycle, we'll actually recommend a lot of the suppliers for that reason. Boeing's valuation is just so discounted right now that we recommend Boeing. But companies like Spirit, which makes large structural components, Howmet's a really good business in the supply chain in the engine. And then you have companies that are more into the maintenance market, where you have more recurring revenue, more pricing power, higher margins. Companies like TransDigm and HEICO, just awesome cash flow compounder businesses. They just have a fuller multiple at the moment compared to Boeing.